If you clicked on this video, chances are you're going through something right now that you can't explain to anyone. The weight on your shoulders feels unbearable, and you're wondering if God has forgotten about you. I need you to understand something that might save your faith. God doesn't discipline those He doesn't love, and He doesn't test those He's not planning to promote. Life has a way of blindsiding us when we least expect it. One day you're cruising along thinking you've got everything figured out, and the next day your world is turned completely upside down. Your job disappears, your relationship crumbles, your health fails, your dreams shatter into a million pieces. And in those moments, when you're on your knees in the darkness, you can't help but ask, God, where are you? Why is this happening to me? But here's what most people don't understand about divine growth. God's classroom doesn't look like our classroom. His training ground doesn't resemble anything we'd choose for ourselves. When God wants to expand your capacity, strengthen your character, and prepare you for your next level, He doesn't send you to a motivational seminar or a self-help workshop. He sends you through experiences that will break you open and rebuild you from the inside out. Today, I'm going to share with you the 5 specific tests that God uses when He's preparing someone for extraordinary growth. These aren't pleasant experiences. They're designed to be challenging, uncomfortable, and sometimes downright painful. But by the end of this video, you'll understand why these tests are actually signs of God's incredible love for you, not His abandonment. The truth is, if you're experiencing any of these 5 things right now, you're not being punished. You're being prepared. You're not being forgotten. You're being forged. And you're certainly not being abandoned. You're being advanced to a level that requires a stronger, more resilient version of yourself. So if you're ready to understand why your pain has a purpose, why your struggle has significance, and why your test is actually your testimony in the making, then stay with me until the end. Because what I'm about to share with you will completely transform how you view your current circumstances. The first test God puts you through when He wants you to grow is the test of isolation. This isn't just about being alone physically, it's about being separated from the people, places, and patterns that once defined your identity. You wake up one day and realize that the friends who used to call you every weekend have gone silent. The family members who once sought your advice now seem distant and distracted. The social circles that once welcomed you with open arms now feel foreign and uncomfortable. You find yourself spending more and more time alone, not by choice, but by circumstance. This isolation isn't accidental, it's intentional. God is strategically removing the voices that have been drowning out His voice in your life. He's creating space for you to hear Him clearly without the interference of other people's opinions, expectations, and agendas. Think about every major biblical figure who experienced significant growth. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness. David hid in caves. Elijah retreated to the mountain. Jesus Himself withdrew to solitary places to pray. Isolation wasn't a punishment for these men. It was preparation for their purpose. When God isolates you, He's not rejecting you. He's protecting you. He's shielding you from the influences that would limit your thinking, diminish your dreams, or contaminate your calling. He knows that certain people in your life, no matter how well-meaning, simply can't go where He's taking you. They can't see what He sees, understand what He understands, or support what He's building in your life. During this season of isolation, you might feel forgotten, overlooked, or even punished. You might wonder why relationships that once seemed solid are now falling apart. You might question whether you've done something wrong to deserve this loneliness. But I need you to understand that God's isolation is always preparation for God's elevation. The isolation is teaching you to find your identity in God alone, not in other people's approval or acceptance. It's teaching you to hear His voice above all other voices. It's strengthening your relationship with Him by removing the distractions that have been competing for your attention and affection. This test is particularly challenging because we're created for community and connection. Isolation goes against our natural desire to belong, to be understood, to be surrounded by people who love and support us. But sometimes, God has to separate us from good people to connect us with the right people. Sometimes He has to remove us from comfortable environments to place us in environments that will challenge us to grow. If you're in a season of isolation right now, don't despair. Don't assume that God has abandoned you or that you're being punished for some unknown sin. Instead, recognize that this separation is strategic. God is creating space for transformation. He's giving you time to develop the inner strength, spiritual maturity, and divine confidence that you'll need for your next assignment. Use this time wisely. Draw closer to God. Deepen your prayer life. Study His Word with greater intensity. Allow Him to speak into your heart without the interference of other voices. Let Him show you who you really are, apart from the roles you play and the relationships you maintain. Because when this season of isolation is over, and it will be over, you'll emerge as a completely different person. You'll have a clarity of purpose that can't be shaken, a strength of character that can't be broken, and a depth of relationship with God that can't be duplicated. But God's not finished with you yet. The test of isolation is just the beginning. The second test God uses to grow you is the test of disappointment. This is when the very things you prayed for, worked toward, and believed God for either don't happen at all or happen completely differently than you expected. You apply for that promotion you've been working toward for years, but it goes to someone else. You believe God for healing, but the diagnosis doesn't change. You trust Him for restoration in your marriage, but the divorce papers still get signed. You have faith for a financial breakthrough, but the bills keep piling up. You expect God to open certain doors, but instead you hear no after no after no. This isn't just disappointment, it's disillusionment. It shakes the very foundation of what you believed about God, about prayer, about faith itself. You start to question whether God really hears you, whether He really cares, whether He's really who you thought He was. But here's what disappointment is actually doing in your life. It's destroying your attachment to outcomes and deepening your trust in God's character. It's teaching you that God's love for you isn't dependent on giving you everything you want, when you want it, how you want it. It's showing you that His plans are often different from your plans, and His plans are always better. The test of disappointment forces you to grapple with some of life's most difficult questions. Do you love God for who He is or for what He gives you? Do you trust Him only when things go your way? Or do you trust Him even when they don't? Is your faith based on God's performance or on God's character? King David understood this test intimately. He was anointed as king while still a teenager, but spent years running for his life from King Saul. He had every reason to be disappointed, to question God's timing, to wonder if the promise was real, but instead of becoming bitter, David used his disappointment to deepen his relationship with God. His Psalms are full of honest expressions of confusion and pain, but they always end with declarations of trust and worship. The Apostle Paul experienced this test when he prayed 3 times for God to remove his thorn in the flesh, but God said no. Paul had to learn that God's grace was sufficient, even when his circumstances were difficult. That disappointment didn't weaken Paul's faith, it refined it. When God allows disappointment in your life, He's not being cruel or indifferent. He's actually protecting you from receiving something at the wrong time or in the wrong way. He sees what you can't see, knows what you don't know, and understands the bigger picture that you're not able to perceive. Sometimes God closes doors to protect you from opportunities that would ultimately limit you. Sometimes He delays answers to prayers because you're not ready for what you're asking for. Sometimes He allows you to experience loss because He wants to give you something better, but you have to let go of the good to receive the great. The test of disappointment is also preparing you for leadership and influence. People who have never experienced disappointment often lack compassion for others who are struggling. They can't relate to pain because they've never felt it deeply. But people who have been disappointed and have learned to trust God anyway, these are the people who can comfort others with the comfort they themselves have received. Your disappointments are not disqualifications. They're qualifications. Every unanswered prayer is teaching you something about God's wisdom. Every closed door is preparing you for the right door. Every no is protecting you for the right yes. But here's the key. You have to respond to disappointment correctly. You can't become bitter, cynical, or closed off. You can't stop believing, stop trusting, or stop hoping. You have to let disappointment do its work of purifying your motives, clarifying your priorities, and deepening your dependence on God. If you're in a season of disappointment right now, I want you to know that God hasn't forgotten about you. He hasn't changed His mind about you. He hasn't abandoned the plans He has for your life. He's simply preparing you for something that requires a different level of faith, a deeper level of trust, and a stronger level of character. Your disappointments are not the end of your story. They're the setup for your comeback. But there's another test coming that will challenge you in ways you never expected. The third test that God uses to grow you is perhaps the most challenging of all, the test of waiting. This is when God gives you a vision, a promise, or a clear sense of direction, but then asks you to wait for His timing before it comes to pass. You know what God has called you to do, but the doors aren't opening. You can see your destiny clearly, but the path to get there is blocked. You feel the pull of purpose in your spirit. But circumstances are keeping you stuck in a holding pattern. You're ready to move, but God is saying, wait. This test is excruciating because it requires you to live in the tension between promise and fulfillment, between vision and reality, between what God has shown you and what you can see with your natural eyes. It's the gap between already and not yet that can drive you to the edge of sanity if you don't understand what God is doing. Abraham received a promise that he would be the father of many nations, but he waited 25 years for Isaac to be born. Joseph received dreams that he would rule and reign, but he spent years as a slave and a prisoner before those dreams came to pass. David was anointed as king, but he waited over a decade before he actually sat on the throne. The waiting period isn't wasted time. It's crucial preparation time. During this season, God is working on you more than He's working on your circumstances. He's developing character qualities in you that you'll need for your assignment: patience, perseverance, humility, dependence, faith, and trust. The test of waiting reveals what's really in your heart. Are you serving God for what He can do for you, or are you serving Him because of who He is? Are you following Him for the benefits, or are you following Him for the relationship? Are you more interested in the blessing or in the one who blesses? Waiting also teaches you that God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't make sense to you. He's coordinating countless factors that you can't see or understand. He's preparing other people, adjusting circumstances, and aligning opportunities in ways that are far beyond your ability to orchestrate. When Joseph finally interpreted Pharaoh's dreams and was promoted to second in command of Egypt, he understood why the waiting was necessary. If he had been elevated too early, he wouldn't have had the character to handle the responsibility. If his dreams had come true on his timeline, he wouldn't have been ready for the magnitude of what God was calling him to do. The waiting period is also when God does some of His deepest work in your heart. He uses this time to purify your motives, clarify your vision, and strengthen your foundation. He strips away everything that isn't essential and reinforces everything that is. He teaches you to find your satisfaction in Him alone, not in the fulfillment of your dreams or the achievement of your goals. During the waiting, you'll be tempted to take matters into your own hands. You'll want to force doors open, manipulate circumstances, or settle for less than what God has promised. You'll be tempted to compare your timeline with other people's timelines and conclude that you're behind, forgotten, or disqualified. But God's delays are not God's denials. His timeline is not your timeline, and His ways are not your ways. What feels like delay to you is actually divine preparation. What looks like God dragging His feet is actually God setting the stage for something magnificent. The test of waiting is also preparing you to help other people who will be in seasons of waiting. Your ability to encourage someone else to trust God's timing will be directly related to your own experience of waiting and trusting. You can't give what you don't have, and you can't teach what you haven't learned. If you're in a waiting season right now, don't waste this time. Use it to deepen your relationship with God. Develop skills that you'll need for your assignment. Work on character issues that God has highlighted in your life. Serve others while you're waiting for your own breakthrough. Let God do the deep work that can only be done when you're not distracted by the fulfillment of your dreams. Remember that God is never late and He's never early. He's always right on time. Your breakthrough is coming, your season is changing, and your promise is still valid. But first, you have to pass the test of waiting. And just when you think you can't wait any longer, another test arrives. The fourth test that God uses to grow you is the test of loss. This is when God removes something or someone from your life that you thought you couldn't live without. It might be a relationship, a job, a dream, your health, your reputation, your security, or even a person you love deeply. This test hits differently than the others because loss involves grief. It's not just about what you don't have. It's about what you had and no longer have. It's the ache of absence, the pain of emptiness, the struggle to make sense of why something good was taken away. Job understood this test. In a single day, he lost his children, his livestock, his servants, and his health. Everything that had defined his life was stripped away. His wife told him to curse God and die, and his friends assumed he must have done something wrong to deserve such suffering. But Job's response revealed the depth of his faith. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The test of loss forces you to confront some of life's deepest questions. What is your identity really based on? Where does your security actually come from? What is truly eternal, and what is temporary? Can you still praise God when everything else is gone? Loss has a way of stripping away everything that isn't essential and revealing what really matters. It peels back the layers of your life and shows you what's at the core. It forces you to discover whether your foundation is built on things that can be taken away or on the one thing that can never be removed, your relationship with God. When God allows loss in your life, He's not being cruel or capricious. He's actually freeing you from attachments that were limiting your growth or preventing you from fully depending on Him. Sometimes we hold on to things so tightly that God has to remove them from our grip so we can receive what He actually wants to give us. The test of loss also teaches you about the difference between what belongs to you and what was simply entrusted to you. Everything in your life, your relationships, your possessions, your opportunities, even your life itself, is ultimately a stewardship, not an ownership. God has the right to give and the right to take away because everything belongs to Him in the first place. This doesn't make loss any less painful. Grief is real, and it's necessary. God doesn't expect you to pretend that loss doesn't hurt or to spiritualize your pain away. He grieves with you, comforts you, and walks with you through the valley of the shadow of death. But He also uses loss to develop qualities in you that can't be developed any other way. Loss teaches you compassion for others who are suffering. It develops empathy, sensitivity, and the ability to comfort others with the comfort you've received. People who have never lost anything significant often lack the depth of character that comes from walking through grief and emerging on the other side. Loss also teaches you about resurrection. Just as Jesus had to die before He could rise again, sometimes things in your life have to die before God can bring them back to life in a new and better way. The loss you're experiencing might be preparation for a restoration that's more beautiful than what you originally had. But perhaps most importantly, loss teaches you that you're stronger than you think you are. You discover that you can survive what you thought would destroy you. You learn that God's grace is sufficient even in your deepest pain. You find out that His strength is made perfect in your weakness. If you're walking through a season of loss right now, please know that you're not alone. God is with you in the grief, and He will bring you through to the other side. This loss is not the end of your story. It's a chapter that's preparing you for something greater. But you'll need the strength you're gaining from this test, because there's one more test that's even more challenging. The fifth and perhaps most difficult test that God allows when He wants you to grow is the test of injustice. This is when you're falsely accused, unfairly treated, or wrongfully punished. It's when you do the right thing but get the wrong outcome. It's when others get credit for your work, when you're blamed for things you didn't do, or when you suffer consequences for someone else's mistakes. This test strikes at the very core of our sense of fairness and righteousness. It makes us want to defend ourselves, fight back, or prove our innocence. It triggers our desire for vindication, justice, and retribution. It makes us want to scream, "This isn't fair!" And we're absolutely right. It isn't fair. Jesus understood this test more than anyone. He was perfect, sinless, and blameless. Yet He was accused of blasphemy, condemned as a criminal, and executed as a revolutionary. He could have called down legions of angels to defend Him, but He chose to trust His Father's plan even when it led through the darkness of injustice. Joseph experienced this test when Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of attempted assault. He had done nothing wrong. In fact, he had resisted temptation and maintained his integrity, but he was thrown into prison anyway. For years, he sat in a cell, knowing he was innocent but having no way to prove it. The test of injustice is particularly painful because it involves other people's choices, not just circumstances. It's not just about what happens to you. It's about what people do to you. It involves betrayal, false accusations, character assassination, and unfair treatment by people who should know better. But here's what the test of injustice is actually doing in your life. It's teaching you to trust God's justice system instead of man's justice system. It's showing you that God sees everything, knows everything, and will ultimately make everything right. It's developing in you a character that can maintain integrity even when integrity isn't rewarded. The test of injustice also teaches you about the true source of your vindication. You learn that you don't have to defend yourself because God is your defender. You don't have to fight for your reputation because God is your reputation. You don't have to prove your innocence because God knows your heart. When you're being treated unjustly, your natural instinct is to fight back, to defend yourself, to make sure everyone knows the truth. But God often asks you to remain silent, to trust Him with your vindication, and to let Him fight your battles. This requires a level of faith and maturity that can only be developed through the test of injustice itself. The Apostle Paul experienced this test repeatedly. He was beaten, imprisoned, and falsely accused throughout his ministry. But he learned to say, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." He understood that his vindication would come from God, not from man. The test of injustice is also preparing you for leadership and influence. Leaders often face criticism, false accusations, and unfair treatment. If you can't handle injustice with grace and maturity, you're not ready for the level of responsibility that God wants to give you. But if you can maintain your integrity and character even when you're being treated unfairly, you're being prepared for something significant. Perhaps most importantly, the test of injustice teaches you about forgiveness. It's easy to forgive people who ask for forgiveness or who admit they were wrong. But forgiving people who never acknowledge their wrongdoing, who continue to justify their actions, or who even repeat their harmful behavior, that requires a supernatural level of grace that can only come from God. If you're experiencing injustice right now, I know how painful and frustrating it is. I know you want to fight back, to defend yourself, to make sure everyone knows the truth. But I want to encourage you to trust God with your vindication. Let Him fight your battles. Let Him defend your reputation. Let Him make things right in His way and in His timing. Your response to injustice is revealing what's really in your heart. Are you more concerned with being right or with being righteous? Are you more focused on your reputation or on your character? Are you more interested in immediate vindication or in long-term transformation? Now that we've walked through all 5 tests that God uses to grow you, isolation, disappointment, waiting, loss, and injustice, I want you to understand something crucial. These tests are not punishments. They're not signs that God has abandoned you or that you've done something wrong. They're actually evidence that God loves you too much to leave you where you are. Every test is designed to develop something specific in your character. Isolation develops independence and intimacy with God. Disappointment develops trust and surrendered expectations. Waiting develops patience and faith. Loss develops gratitude and eternal perspective. Injustice develops forgiveness and humility. These tests are not random or meaningless. They're carefully designed by a loving Father who sees your potential and wants to prepare you for your purpose. He knows what it's going to take for you to handle your assignment, and He's making sure you're ready. The pain you're experiencing right now is not pointless. It's purposeful. The struggle you're going through is not senseless. It's strategic. The test you're in is not meant to break you. It's meant to build you. But here's the key. You have to pass these tests. You can't become bitter, give up, or walk away from your faith. You have to let these experiences do their work in your life. You have to trust that God knows what He's doing, even when you can't see the bigger picture. If you're going through any of these tests right now, I want to encourage you. You're not alone, you're not forgotten, and you're not finished. God is with you in the test, and He will bring you through to the other side. Your current chapter is not your final chapter. Your test is preparing you for your testimony. So hold on, keep faith, trust the process. Because the version of yourself that emerges from these tests will be stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and more powerful than you ever imagined possible. God is not just trying to get you through your tests. He's trying to get your tests through you. Your greatest growth is coming from your greatest challenges. Your biggest breakthroughs are being birthed from your biggest breakdowns. And your most powerful testimony is being written in your most painful test. God hasn't forgotten about you. He's just getting you ready for what He's prepared for you. Trust Him. The growth is worth it.